Hi Nat5, so we're still looking at evolution of species and in particular at the term adaptation. So if we go right back to the beginning of this whole unit, then some of the first things we looked at were terms that we need. And one of the most important things we had was niche. And niche is how exactly something fits into the ecosystem. So how they impact on other living things, how they impact on the environment, everything. Okay, and something that makes them well suited to that is called an adaptation. Anything that makes something fit in well. Okay, so on the next slide, which is obviously, as I say in the video, just a little bit further on, I've got several pictures and I want you to look at each one and just think, okay, so for a start, what is it? Where would you expect to find it? And something about it that helps it live there. Anything. Doesn't have to be, could be really obvious, doesn't have to be really complicated, but something that says, right, okay, that's why that would be good for where it lives. Okay, so first off, we have the flounder, we have a mole, conifer, sea turtle, snowdrop, and the cactus. Okay, so we need to pause it and think about what we've got and what makes it good for them. Okay, so things that you might have gone for. So the flounder is obviously living on the bed of a river or a seabed, and you'll notice that its face is kind of weirdly on its side. That's because obviously it needs to be able to look up the way rather than down at the seabed. And it's a flatfish, so it's well camouflaged, all of that kind of stuff. Conifers, the leaves are turned into needles so that they don't actually lose too much water and they can retain as evergreens. Your snowdrop has a bulb underneath the ground so it can survive the cold weather. Your mole with its shovelly hands. The sea turtle with its flippers and kind of how it can survive in the open ocean. And the cactus obviously with its storage and its spines. There's hundreds and hundreds of things for every living thing. You just have to be able to look at it and go, okay, why? Okay, so when you're talking about the adaptations, what you need to do is just come with this term, characteristic that makes an organism well suited to its environment or niche. And that's an adaptation. So any animal or plant, what they have that makes them well suited to where they live. They can be really quite extreme and quite severe, and they could look rather bizarre to us, but it works for them. So like your anglerfish with its little bioluminescent lure, your stick insect looking tremendously like a leaf, very well camouflaged. Here's another camouflage, the pygmy seahorse. You know, all of these things help them survive, therefore they are adaptations. And back to what we're saying in the mutations bit, our new alleles, the things that allow you to actually have the potential to change, the potential to adapt, is created by mutation. And these are potentially then mixed up if you use sexual reproduction, so that would be making up sex cells, and then random fertilization would also help. But any mutation that produces a new allele has produced the potential to allow adaptation. So that might mean that you become better suited to a particular environment, or it might mean that you could actually colonize a new environment. So there are two types of adaptation that you need to be able to talk about. We split them into two groups. And I think they're kind of obvious in terms of the words, although this one doesn't look particularly nice. Physiological. Physiological means a physical adaptation. So it could be really obvious, like the camouflage in that stick insect. It could be something that is physically inside the cell. So it might be something about a particular hormone that is produced that means that you can signal things faster. There's all sorts of things, but it's a physical adaptation. And then you have behavioural adaptations. And behavioural adaptations would be an individual behaviour, or it could be social behaviour. So how you fit into a group might mean that you could then survive better. Okay, so looking at adaptations, you have to be able to kind of split them into these two areas. Okay, so this is a really important point, that if you have variation in the population, then there is the potential, if the conditions change, for adaptation to take place. And that basically means that if you think about your tolerance curves from back a bit, okay, and you have your factor here, whatever that is, temperature, water levels, salt levels, oxygen levels. Okay, and up the side we have survival. If you have variation, then what that means is, if this is your kind of curve of where they like to be, and obviously this section here is great, they're doing really, really well, but when you go up away from that, they start to not do so fabulously well and not do so fabulously well. If you have a mutation, which means that you actually have this getting a little bit broader, so you actually have some of them that could survive even up a wee bit here. If things change, then these guys suddenly become better competitors, and that means that they're more likely to survive, and potentially they can adapt to the fact that this factor has changed. Now that's all really complicated in terms of how quick a generation is, how much of a change there is to a factor, but potentially this happens over a long time, then you can evolve and you can also form even a new species. The last thing to think about here is, okay, just as a little nice picture, what condition change could happen which would give an advantage or a disadvantage to one of these over the others? Just something to think about, but that's us done.